It's finally time to add some textures and shaders to this character and turn this grey model into something vibrant. We'll paint a basic texture for the face, add textures and shaders to the eyes, and transform these bulky hair shapes into fine hair strands. So welcome back everyone, this is Ram from Crossmind Studio and you're watching chapter number 9 of the animated character creation series. For the premium version of this course, which includes 10 bonus chapters, project files and other useful things, check out the details, hotkeys, PDF and more in the description. Let's dive right in. Now before we jump into today's session, there is an important update to discuss. With each Blender version, we anticipate new updates and the recent release of version 4.0 is no exception. This update has brought about several enhancements across the different aspects of Blender. So including interface improvements, rigging layers, snapping, node tools, and few advancements in graph editors. So these updates are scattered in all parts of the Blender. So we'll try and use these updates as much as possible, whichever fall in our workflow and process, and integrate these updates into our workflow in the later rigging chapters as well. But one specific update directly impacting today's session is related to the principal BSDF node. When you access this node, you'll notice the change in the interface. They are now collapsible, enhancing organization. You have much more room to organize your nodes, and with a bit of change in the order and how these properties appear. So there's a bit of shuffling going on, and there is also an overall update in how this node operates, improving the quality of output. So specifically, Sheen produces now much more natural and good looking results. Now this chapter and the next one was recorded using experimental version during the development of 4.0. As a result, the node version featured in the video is from the previous LTS release. It's essential to clarify that despite this, there won't be any impact on the workflow. So we will continue our session with the videos recorded in the LTS version, and towards the end of each video, we will revisit all our shaders and open them in version 4.0. In Blender 4.0, we'll utilize the reworked Sheen effect on few of the clothing items, and it's important to note that if you are already using Blender 4.0, there is no need to go back to the older version. You can seamlessly follow the tutorial in whichever version you are using, whether it's LTS 4.0. So let me just take you through few of these changes now. Now to demonstrate few of these changes, I have this file with a simple cube. It's actually the same file which I have opened in the previous versions of Blender 3.6, and this one is using 4.0. So from here you can see this is version 4.0. As you can see here, this is the principal BSDF that we are used to, and it's still being used in LTS version. But right here in 4.0, this looks much more compact. But as you might have already noticed that the properties which are mentioned right here remains the same. There is a base color in both of these. There's metallic right here as well, roughness, sheen, alpha, and everything is listed here as well. But the interface is slightly different. Instead of a huge list right here, all of these sub properties are divided into several categories, like specular, which is right here under the collapsible menu. So if you expand this gives you all the properties related to subsurface. So right here, subsurface, radius, subsurface IOR, subsurface anisotropy, all those things are listed under the subsurface category. Similarly, properties related to specular are mentioned under the specular collapsible menu. Then we have transmission and transmission roughness, which is listed here. Now the roughness of transmission is being controlled by the overall roughness here. This property is removed from new principal BSDF. And then we have sheen, which is sheen tint, sheen weight, which is listed in the sheen menu here. And the clear coat, which is mentioned here, is now called coat. So if you expand all of these, you'll see we have exactly the same thing, but the order is slightly different. So when you're working with PBR textures and everything, it's much more convenient now to plug all those PBR textures like metallic, roughness, IOR and alpha and normal. Those main properties are found right here. And also collapsible nodes give you much more room to organize your nodes. Similar thing is being followed in the geometry node as well. Now, other than the interface, few things have been removed. Like I mentioned, under the transmission, roughness is removed. which can be controlled with the overall roughness right here. Similarly, subsurface color is removed as well. So instead of having to use different color for subsurface, you can simply use a color here and the same color will be used for the subsurface as well. So you don't need to copy the same color at the both properties. Subsurface can use the base color itself. Now this file right here is the exact copy of this file. In fact, you'll see whatever changes I'll make here will update right here as well. I'm just going to render this in cycle. If I change the base color and save this file, then you'll see once I refresh the file, we have the base color changed here and it renders exactly the same. Similarly, if I bring a texture, let's say noise texture, and plug it into specular right here and save the file, then the same will be plugged into the specular section on the IOR level. So if you need to use any specular texture, you can plug that into under the specular IOR level. And now if I bring bump node and try to use the same texture here, now this bump node goes under the normals here. Now right here as well under the code you have normals, but don't confuse it with this. This is a normal for the clear code. The main normal which you need, which was right here, is now located at the top of the node. So if I refresh the file, you'll see this normal now goes right here, right under the main 4 properties. Now let me disconnect all of these. Now if I bring in some of this subsurface value, let's say 0.5, then this is the result I get. Now let's say if I use green color here, then I need to copy the same color right here as well. So to do this in the new 4.0 version node, new principled BSDF, I need to go to the subsurface and enable the weight all the way to 1. Now this makes it a subsurface material. Now right here we only had one parameter. Now here you'll see this main subsurface parameter is divided into 2 of these. One is the weight, which decides whether or not it's a subsurface material. And the second thing is scale of subsurface. From here you can tweak how farther deep the object captures the light, the scale of the subsurface. Now if I save this file, you'll see right here I have 0.5 in the subsurface. If I revert this, let's expand the subsurface menu, and here you'll see subsurface weight is all the way to 1 and the scale is set to 0.5, and that's all you need to take care of. Alright, so if you are making some subsurface material, let's say for skin shader or something, just bring it all the way to 1, and whatever value I'm inputting in the subsurface, use the same value in the scale of the subsurface. Alright, which I will also be mentioning in few of the annotations in the video later on. This is all you need to keep in mind while you're following this tutorial. And I'm pretty sure this would seem pretty obvious. I didn't actually have to explain all of this, but few of the beginners who are actually new to Blender, those who needed a bit of explanation what exactly changed. So now we are going to continue using this node in our tutorial. And once we are done, we are going to open our main files in Blender version 4.0 just to give you a run through. And then we are going to use sheen on a few of the cloth objects which have been reworked and gives much better results. For instance, if I disable subsurface all the way, you can see if I bring in sheen here, it doesn't show much of the effect. But right here in 4.0, you can clearly see the difference. I think to demonstrate this, I'll bring a slightly rounder object. Now you should clearly be able to see here sheen, to me it doesn't actually make any of the difference to my shader. But right here in 4.0, it's much more evident, and you can also control the color of the sheen. So this might be helpful for our cloth items in the characters model. Other than that, rest everything remains the same. So let's continue building on our characters shaders and textures. And if you have any query, feel free to jump on Discord or discuss it in the comment section. So we are back to our Blender file, and this is where we had left off in the previous chapter. So before proceeding further, one thing to keep in mind is that to set the right scale for the character, for whatever scale you are going for in your project. Just cross check if everything is in line before proceeding further. So maybe there could be hair dynamics or the shaders and things like these could change if you later on decide to change the scale of the character. So just go to the site properties and select the character's body, and accordingly just check the dimensions of the character, and if you'd like to scale things up and down, just do that before proceeding further. All right, so right now it's showing me 3.37 meters. If you'd like, you can just select everything right here, just scale it down. So if you're going for something realistic, then this should be the right scale for you. All right, so once you're done, just Control A and apply scale. That's it. So now the scale of everything is 1 right here. Just save your file. So I'm going to start with the character's body first. Just going to isolate this with a / on number pad. So we already have a body shader that we had made during previous chapter, UV section. So right here I have UDIMs. If you go to the UV editor, you'll see if I go to the edit mode, we have the UVs here. All right, so let's go back to the shader editor. First things first, I just want a little bit of subsurface scattering for this character. So if I disable the texture, for now I'm going to leave rest everything as it is. Just wanted a little bit of subsurface scattering, and change this to random walk. So this is the base material for our character. If I hit the render preview, just make sure you are using cycles render. All right, so at this moment we don't have much to be seen on this character. So let's first work on the texture that we have. I'm going to get into texture paint mode and then jump to active tool properties right here. In the texture paint mode, I'm simply going to fill a skin color in this. So something like this, and then take the fill tool from the toolbar on the side and just click once on your character like this. So now if you go to the UV editor, you'll see it's filling the color on the entire UV map. Now every time you do any changes, you'll have to save the textures right here. Right after you have made some progress in texturing, just make sure to save your UDIMs textures, whatever changes you have made. Otherwise it's not going to show up in the render. Once that is done, pick slightly more darker like red color or something. Now I'm going to pick draw tool from here for brush. Now with this color selected, I'm going to draw a stroke here. So in case if you don't see this stroke, just cross check your properties. Just make sure there is nothing in the texture. The stroke type is set to space and spacing is set to 10%. If the spacing is too much, then this is going to create gaps in between the strokes. All right. Now I'm just going to paint a few patches on the skin. Going to reduce the strength right here and enable the symmetry on the X axis, and then paint a few patches right here. Very light patches, a few around cheek right here, a little bit on the lips. I'm keeping the brush light. I mean, I can keep painting on top of this and make it darker, but it's really hard to blend a darker stroke. So let's say if I paint like this, then I'll have to blend it. That takes a lot of time. So that's why I'm keeping it lighter so that there's a gradation everywhere like this. A few patches on the nose right here. I hope you can see it. Then I'm going to paint a bit of circle around here. This is not really accurate to actual human skin. So I just wanted to show that skin have some thickness and there's a presence of blood instead of everything having a flat shade. And this character is of fair complexion, so it makes sense if we see a few red areas. Kids have softer skin, so I think we are not too off even if anatomically it's not correct. And if you're working on really low configuration, I would suggest that you keep your textures to limited. And honestly, I think since we are not really creating some crisp and high detailed texture, I could have used low resolution texture like 2K, because this is really cartoony and simple character. We won't be making any wrinkles or a high detailed bump on the skin pores and all that. Just pay attention to your resources. And if you're struggling to paint, just reduce the texture size. Just go to the UV editor and save your texture. If you are having difficulty reaching to certain parts, and let's say if we can see this here inside the mouth, we are having difficulty painting. So what you can do is change this to image editor, and in image editor, Right here you can see view, we are viewing the image. Instead change this to paint, then you have access to all these tools right here as well. So I'm just going to reduce a brush size. If you're wondering what are the shortkeys for reducing the brush size, increase and decrease, it's same as Photoshop, square brackets, up and down. So just paint a few patches here. If you want, you can just fill this entire area. Inside of the mouth is red, so this makes sense. And inside the nostrils you can also paint. So going back to the orthographic view, hit 5 on the number pad, and all the short commands can be seen in the PDF in the description as well. So just going to redden these parts. If I increase the strength, bigger strokes take time to register, and that's fine. Now let's go to the shader editor, and I'm going to plug the same image in subsurface color. Overall it's working fine, but I feel there could be more redness. Now there are few other parameters you can consider changing. If you want to make the skin softer, you have these radius parameters for subsurface. Now I'll paint a little more on this texture. So I'll stop talking and just do a bit of a quick job. So I think this is enough. So if you have multiple, let's say if you're painting two colors, one in the foreground color, one in the background color, and you can switch these by pressing X, just like Photoshop. So I'm just switching these and blending colors right here. Now going to save the file, just paint a few more here, like this. I'm just going to reduce the brush size, change the mode to darken or multiply, and in the brush properties you can either access these properties from here, or if you're working in the full screen mode you have these properties here as well, or you can have a larger view from side panel, texture paint tool right here. So now we have this smaller brush. In this brush I'm going to increase the spacing from 10% to something around 50 or something, like this. Then in the jitter amount, if you increase this all the way to 1 or 2, you'll see we are getting these freckles kind of thing. So going to increase the brush size, increase the strength, and paint a few freckles. Maybe reduce the strength. I hope you can see it. So it's a very minor impression right here. So I'm just going to paint a little bit here, and then reduce the jitter, reduce the spacing back to 10. You can also change the stroke method from space to anchored. And now if you increase the strength, you can create few points like this. So if you have certain texture, in that case that helps. Right now I'm going to just manually increase and decrease the brush size, maybe few larger dots right here and few smaller dots. If you're working with the brush, you can always use the brush pressure right here to increase and decrease the size of the brush. By brush, I mean stylus. So this seems enough. I'm going to save the file, go back to the shader editor, and let's see what's happening in the render. So I think subsurface looks a bit too much. From 0.06, we can reduce it to 0.03. Alright, so this looks fine. I'm going to work on the rest of the things and see according to the overall appearance of the character. If anything needs to be changed later, I'll do that. But for the kind of simple look I'm going for, this is absolutely fine. Now, anything about this, if you'd like to tweak, just Shift F, merge these by dragging, and you can bring hue saturation or RGB curves, and you can tweak a certain aspects here. Now, other than the face, these parts, the hands and a bit of knee will be visible. Other than that, everything is under the clothes. So let's paint a few patches here. A little bit of redness around these areas. Now keep in mind, when I paint this, whatever areas are hiding behind some surface occluded, you'll start seeing this paint mask. So that's a bit of a problem. Now there's an option here, just disable this occlude, only paint onto the faces directly under the brush. All right, so if you disable this, the paint is going to go through and through, but the problem is area behind now is not painted. So for that, if you disable backface culling, now it should go through and through. But then you'll start seeing these lines right here. That's because brush is not reaching these particular angles. There you'll see these lines. So for that, in the fall off angle, you can reduce this to somewhere around 45 or 50, 55 degrees or something. So what will happen is, whatever is pointing towards the screen, only there our brush will work. So in that case, we won't be painting on the sides, like on these parts, and there's a less room for those lines to appear. So it's like we are avoiding to paint on the sides. Now the problem here is, if I paint now somewhere, it's going to paint through and through because I have disabled these options. So just keep that in mind. Do not try to paint while the other mesh is behind it. For now, while painting a bit of redness around the finger, I'll use these options. Leave the occlude and backface culling off and paint a few patches here. And once that is done, I'll enable the option again, so that I don't accidentally paint in areas where I don't want to. Like right here, I painted a few patches here, which appeared on the backside as well. So for this area, it's not a good option. I'm going to enable these again and reduce the fall off further. If you want, you can also paint nails here. I'm just going to make a bit of suggestion about nails. Let me just go back to the view and you'll see, so our character is starting to look good. We may have to adjust the shader a bit more. So just tweak the numbers a bit here in subsurface scattering. So the scatter radius was a bit too much, because of which it was looking way too soft. Just tone this down a bit. And I'm also thinking maybe I can reduce the redness a bit with the help of this RGB curves. So this looks fine, and I think we can go ahead with this. On these glasses, I'm going to create a simple shader, and let's call this one glasses. And for faster preview, I'm just going to reduce the sample a little. So in the shader editor, let's type glass BSDF, get rid of principal BSDF. And with Control Shift click, you can just connect this with the material output. So pretty simple default glass shader. On this glass object, I'm using a solidify and a subdivision surface modifier for smoother round edges. And for the frame here, I'm just going to select the frame and create a new material. Call this one frame. Just going to use a bit of warm color here in the base color. And for this, I'm going to increase the transmission all the way to 1 and leave rest everything as it is. And if you want, you can add one volume absorption right here. And let's say if you have a glass and you want to fill the volume with certain dense color. So with the help of volume absorption, you can make it appear like solid glass. So it's going to give you a nice solid look for the glass. Now for the eyes of the character, I'm simply going to select both of these. So we had made these dummy eyes for quick visualization, but now let's try and make a UV sphere with the 16 segments and scale it down of about the same size that we had for the previous eye. And now let's get rid of these two. We won't be needing these. At the center, if you want to have quads, you can simply select every alternate edge and delete dissolve edges. Now if you apply subdivision surface, you'll see a smoother quads at the center as well. Shade smooth. And I'm going to make a duplicate of this. Let me just apply all transform. I'll select about these many faces, Control I to invert and delete these faces. Let me just disable the proportionate editing, and I'm going to push these inside and make a shape like this. We can get rid of these center faces, extrude this, scale it down, push these inside, something like this. This is for the iris part. At the end, right here, just select the entire thing and grid fill this. All right. And to UV the outer area, I'm simply going to select one of these loops, mark seam, and select everything and unwrap. In the UV editor, this is what you should get. This is the front side and this is the back side. Now in the shader editor, let's create a new shader and bring one gradient texture. And change this to spherical texture. Now, if I press Ctrl T on this to bring the mapping coordinates and use our UV, this is what you're going to get. Now, what we need to do is align this gradient to the front side of the eye. The first thing, I'm going to crunch these number down so we can start seeing this radial formation. Now, you'll have to pay attention to these numbers a little. So this is a bit tricky part. So to avoid this, if you are having difficulty, you can simply bring one image texture, make an image texture and paint a little bit of white consistent area in the center for the iris mask. Now let's see if we can make this work. I'm simply going to drag these numbers. So I think we are reaching the front and then move it upwards. And it seems like we might be able to do it without the image texture. Now in the main shader, use the same thing to create a mask. Let me just hide this area. Now we have this texture here, but the intensity of this is a bit dull. So I'm going to bring a math node and plug this right here. Change this to multiply so we can make a bright patch here. Now let's plug this in transmission as well. Let's go to the render view reduce the roughness, and this is what you will see. Let's bring one simple mix color node and give it a bit of off-white color. Now what we need to do is mask this area out. Simply bring a transparent material and then bring a mix shader. Now we can use the same thing, same gradient for this factor. Now all the insides are masked out. So now here we see the iris part. If you want to have some refractions here, transmission here, you can simply bring one add shader and use the another layer of same shader here. So now you'll see these reflections here. For the internal part, simply create one material, diffuse BSDF and put it right here. Now for the UV for iris, simply select everything, press U to unwrap, project from view, and that should create a decent UV for iris. I'm going to bring one image texture, connect this to diffuse color, and in this I'm going to open one iris texture that I have, a PNG image. This image texture is a bitmap, and you can use any paint program, Krita, Photoshop to paint this out. You can also make it using Blender itself. For that you need quite some decent knowledge about nodes. So at this moment it would be a bit difficult to pack all that information within this modeling tutorial, and it might be a bit too much of information. So maybe we can discuss nodes in some other tutorials, but your end goal is to have a bit of texture for iris part, and you can do that in many ways. I'm going to fix these UVs a bit. With proportionate editing, scale these up like this. Now let's see what's going on here. Now if you want, you can select both of these, press Ctrl J to combine this, and then you can press Ctrl A, apply location, and then when you apply mirror modifier, this would fill in for other eye on the right. You can see the eyes on the both sides. I can adjust the eyes scale a bit. In the edit mode, just going to scale it up a bit. Just check from all different views if it's sitting in properly or not. Yeah, I think more or less it's there. Alright, so now let's move on to the next part, which is going to be hair. And eye seems to be working fine. The texture is a bit stylized, but kind of like the gradation in this texture, so not going to bother much about it. Just make sure eyes are resting well in the sockets. If there's any modification needed, just do that. All right, so I see a bit of gap here, and I'll fix that. Maybe I'm just going to make a shape key sockets just in case if anything goes wrong. I can always tune it up and down. Now for the hair part, let me just select one of the strand, and I'm going to isolate this one. We are going to create a new material, and in this material, let's apply one noise texture. Let me just make a bit of room for shader editor. Now let's bring mapping coordinates with Ctrl T, and I'm going to stretch this texture in one of the direction. Let me just change this to UV first. So what I'm doing here is trying to adjust the grains a bit. So I want these lines to be running across the entire hair strand. So something like this. Now with this node selected, let's apply one color ramp. Now in this color ramp, we can add multiple colors. Let me just add a few points. We can start with something darker, shade of brown. Then the second one could be slightly more variation of brown. And at the center, we can have sort of a bright color. Just play with these color headers until you find something useful. So yeah, something like this. Let's see how this looks in render. This can work for our model, but at this moment it looks a bit chunky and not really soft. So what I'm thinking is we can use the same texture in the alpha map. So if I plug this here, you'll see there's a transparency in between. And if I map range this, I can make this work. So just by controlling the levels of this texture, I can control the opacity of this entire hair strand based on the noise texture. So it would appear as if there are finer strands of hair. Pardon the voiceover gets a bit glitchy when recording during rendering. Alright, so this looks nice actually. The model looks much more softer. Now what if we use the same thing in the roughness as well? We can also use a bit of subsurface. It's not really a perfect way, but I just want to catch some of the backlight, make it appear as if it's translucent. So in this case, this works, and it's not much of cheating if it works. So yeah, this seems much better. Now, there's one thing I wanted to mention is that if you remember when we were making these hair, we had used this profile, right? Let me just bring it back. So this is the profile that we had made. But if you look at this now, this profile is much more detailed. So what's happening in this is basically I have added a few more circles. If I go to the edit mode, if I keep adding more detail here, that will reflect here as well. So instead of having one strand, I was thinking we could have few circles to detail the profile so that in side views, there will be a break in silhouette. And if you want to make the overall thing a bit more dense, you can simply select few of these points and make a duplicate. So now within your profile, you have multiple curves and the geometry is not really hollow. There are a few more curves within. Because of that, the appearance will be much more denser. Just make sure to not make it too heavy. If you feel computer is having performance issues, then you can always just keep it simple. You can also adjust the resolution of these profile curves from here. So let's go back to the full view. So I'm going to select all of these curves and then select this curve and press Ctrl L, link material. Now this will transfer the material to rest of the hair strands. It seems we are pretty close. It's just that it will be nice if we could see through these hair a bit. So maybe tweaking opacity might work. So this looks good. I think we can go ahead with this. With clear coat, we can add another layer of glossiness. So yeah, this looks good. So slowly it's starting to at least look alive, and instead of gray materials everywhere, we can see the character's face. It kind of looks cute. I think this is turning out well. Let's spend some more time on the rest of the things, on the clothes and everything. And I'm sure once we see some more colors around it, this will start to look much more better, even more vibrant. Now here I have opened the same file in LTS version, and right here we have 4.0. So if I select the body, and this is the shader that we have made. Now right here in the 4.0, you can see it's the same shader. And instead of this subsurface color, which we had connected right here in subsurface color, since that property is removed here, without that as well, it's producing the same effect. You just need to plug your texture into the base color, and automatically that will be used in the subsurface as well. And then for the subsurface radius and everything, 0.3, 0.06, 0.3, and subsurface overall weight 0.063, is now in the scale right here. And the rest of the shaders were pretty simple, so I'm not going to explain those. But right here, for the hair shader, let's see what's going on. So pretty much everything is same. So hope it clears out few doubts, and we'll continue to do the same in the next chapter as well. We are going to create shaders for clothes, and there we are going to update few of our shaders in 4.0 using this sheen. It creates this nice Fresnel kind of effect, which could be quite useful for the cloth parts. And if you want, you can use some of this in skin just for the bit of stylized look, but I think this will be more relevant for the cloth parts. So if you have any more doubts, you can just use the comment section or Discord, and hope this helps even if you're using the previous version or the latest version of the Blender. So that's all for now. Concluding this chapter, if you want to push your character for more realistic look, you can use detailed brushes instead of simple colors and incorporate additional maps. You can learn more about this in chapter number 6 of content creation series, which we did a while ago, where we modeled this skull. But not now, that might be too much for you and might be distracting. So after you have completed this course, so that you don't get distracted. Texturing in detail is a whole different subject, and we can't fit everything in this series, but the basic texturing process remains the same. So I hope this chapter helped you understand how to navigate in the texturing workspace. This process itself might take some time to get used to. Keep it simple for now and focus on memorizing the process. In the next chapter, we are going to shade the clothes, create some vibrant shaders, paint a few textures, and combine them with some other downloaded PBR textures. Jump to Discord server if you'd like to discuss anything related to this on channel dedicated to this series. Check pinned comment for frequently asked questions and problems. Check description for PDF of keyboard shortcuts, discount coupons, and other mentioned resources for this tutorial. If you enjoyed this chapter, do check out the full playlist and hope you continue all the way till the end. Also consider buying the premium version and unlock the additional chapters and project files and bonus content, which will take you through the process of rigging with Rigify, creating a nice walk cycle animation, creating secondary animations using cloth physics and bone constraints, and rendering your entire project using Cycles Render Engine. Share your work with me on Instagram, tag me with Crossmind, and participate in discussion on Discord channel for this course. Links are in the description. Please give it a like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. Share your thoughts in the comment section and don't forget to share it with your colleagues and on social media to help us reach the wider audience. Thank you for all your support and love. Let's jump to the next video.